is a writer for the Roto Underworld. He's a co-host of a podcast with Upside. He's also a dynasty ranker for Fantasy Pros, and self-proclaimed diehard Eagles fan. That is Dan Turner, Eagle Dan FF on Twitter. Dan, thank you for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm real excited to be on.
Yeah, man, we're going to talk Philadelphia Eagles. We had your co-host Jay on previously to discuss the Giants, and so now we're discussing the crosstown rivals Eagles. How does that dynamic work out in season with you guys being Eagles fans and Giants fans?
Well, how it works out is I'm always right and he's always wrong, and that's just the way it's been for about over like a year now. So I mean, we had a bet actually going last year where we had some bold predictions for our show, and whoever had the best bold prediction record at the end got to name a punishment for the other. So I ended up winning that handily, and he's a big Duke fan, so I actually got his face superimposed into Tyler Hansborough's body, and he had to use that for a Twitter avatar for about 3 months. So that was great. So
Yeah.
it's nice being right.
Yeah, I definitely remember that. Did not know the story behind that, but that's hilarious. That makes it funny. But let's dive into these Philadelphia Eagles. They've hired a new head coach, Nick Sirianni. They after going 4-11 last year, firing Doug Peterson. They came into 2020 with pretty decent expectations, considering they were mostly a veteran team, the division that they play in. But then we saw Carson Wentz basically implode, which led to him and the Eagles essentially parting ways at the end of the year, and it also led to Jalen Hurts getting his opportunity. So, what are your expectations among, as an Eagles fan and amongst the fan base? Would you say for the Eagles heading into 2021?
I think it's definitely a rebuilding year for us. I don't think there's any realistic expectation of making like a deep playoff run. I think with the new coaching staff, that's always it takes a while for everyone to get up to speed on the new system and new scheme and everything. Or trying to get younger because we've like as you said, we were a veteran team last year. I think trying to milk that last little bit out of that 2017 Super Bowl roster, and obviously we see how it turned out. We ended up failing miserably. And Wentz is gone, Peterson is gone, so now we have Sirianni and Hurts. So I think for this year, we should try to get younger, make sure we like the system's well. I think it'll benefit everyone to get a fresh start, have the playbook be built around the players we have, and go from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said that the Eagles are in a rebuilding year. I've kind of called it they're teeter-tottering between rebuilding and not rebuilding. I mean, all their moves have said that they're rebuilding, but they still, I guess, haven't they haven't come out and said that. And no
Mhm.
team does, but it's Howie Roseman. They still got a veteran roster for the most part, but it really all is going to come down. I mean, I think they are giving Jalen Hurts this opportunity to really see, is he the guy? They have 2 first round picks that could essentially become 3 first round picks, depending what happens with the Carson Wentz deal. So that could position them to get a top quarterback in next year's draft if Hurts proves to not be the guy. But from a fantasy perspective, he definitely made immediate impact last year as a fantasy asset, mainly with his legs. He was on a 16 game pace of almost 1,100 rushing yards, was on pace for 12 rushing touchdowns. He left a lot to be desired as a passer, though. But in his 4 starts, even including that weird game against Washington in Week 17, he was the QB 9 in fantasy points per game during that stretch. Currently going off the board is the QB 10, according to 4for4.com's aggregated ADP. What are your expectations for Jalen Hurts heading into 2021?
I think he's definitely going to improve on what he did last year. Like, there's no denying it. He everyone says like he was a bad passer last year. I mean, you can't escape that. And everyone points to his completion percentage and how it was in the low, 50, 51, 52%. But then you realize like a lot of those passes were deep passes. He was in an offense that wasn't really built for him. Everyone was dysfunctional. It was a losing season and everyone knew it. And a lot of the leaders of the team had their foot out the door. So I think with this year, with Sirianni giving him a chance to build the offense around him, and this is where it gets like complicated because there's a difference between Jalen Hurts, the real life quarterback, and then Jalen Hurts, the fantasy quarterback. Because Jalen Hurts, the fantasy quarterback, even though he wasn't the best passer, still averaged almost 24 fantasy points per game in the games he started. So if you think about what he did last year as his floor, with an offense being built around him, with him completing more high percentage passes to his running backs, taking some notes from Indy's offense of like throwing from out of the backfield to his running backs and upping that completion percentage up, as well as some of the draft moves of getting his college teammate in Devonta Smith. They're showing that they're building around him, and if he can improve even like 8 percentage points as a passer, he can definitely rise up into that top tier of fantasy quarterbacks. Am I saying he's ever going to be Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady? No, I'm not. But in terms of fantasy, he can definitely rise up there.
Yeah, I definitely think, I like what you said in terms of the team and the situation last year versus this year. Adding Devontae Smith. I mean, they still have Jalen Reagor in the mold as well. Nick Sirianni coming into what you would hope would be to build an offense around him. I imagine that the best case scenario would be something similar to what the Ravens have done in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. I think that would be your best case scenario. Unfortunately, Philly doesn't have the defense that Baltimore has to kind of marry those two styles of offense and defense. So Jalen Hurts will have to air it out more. I mean, this is a kid that has bet on himself his whole career, so I don't see him being any different. He's definitely built that way. So it's going to be intriguing to see, but from a fantasy perspective, definitely all in. Someone we have questions about. I know I have questions about Miles Sanders. He was someone that people comped in the offseason to Christian McCaffrey. I think that's how high expectations have gotten for Miles Sanders. But he played, in 12 games after dealing with some injuries. Was still good in some spots, especially some spots where you would expect him to not be good, and ends up doing well. Sometimes for the event of a large run or one that went the distance, but that's part of his game, part of who he is. But he wasn't what maybe some expected, myself included. He was the RB 23 in fantasy points per game and in PPR points. He's currently going off the board as the RB 18, the ninth pick in the third round of 12-team leagues. How do you feel about Sanders and his current price tag?
Oh, I absolutely love him. If I can get him at that price, give him to me all day. You're looking at that range, he's pretty much going as your running back three if you're going running back in the first two rounds. So if you want to get like an elite receiver or someone like Kelsey in those rounds and then pick up Sanders as your running back number two, I mean I'm absolutely down for something like that. I think that last year he did struggle in pass protection and he did struggle in receiving, but I think a lot of that had to do with, again, sometimes he was wide open and Carson Wentz threw it into like the fifth row. So I mean, it's not all on him. Yeah, he can improve, but I know that the Eagles, they drafted Gainwell and signed on Johnson, and a lot of people that's scaring a lot of people off. But I think I think that Gainwell is just a massive upgrade over Boston Scott, and Philly was never going to have Sanders be the bell cow. That's not the kind of offense that they're going to run. But if he can get the same like snap share that he got last year, and then have those other players fit into the different slots, especially with the kind of offense that Sirianni is expected to run, then I think that his numbers can improve and he can do better than he did last year. And at that price tag, I'm gonna get him all day.
Yeah, I mean, as your RB 3, definitely not a bad deal to have there, especially with the pass catching prowess that he has. Obviously the question with Miles Sanders has always been the workload. Is it going to be there? He was getting that workload last year, just dealt with some injuries. The Philadelphia offense wasn't very good, so it leaves a bad taste in fantasy managers' mouths. And then on top of that, when you consider all the running backs that they've added, I mean, no one really scares you from a standpoint of, they could compete with Miles Sanders for the job, but it's just the fact that Philadelphia just keeps adding them. And so it just makes you kind of lose confidence, especially the Kenneth Gainwell pick. But I just started thinking the other day, maybe Kenneth Gainwell, because he is very similar to Miles Sanders when you just look at the build and the type of players that they are and how they can be utilized in a football game. Maybe Kenneth Gainwell is a down the line type of player of type of move for the Philadelphia Eagles. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. I mean, I was shocked that he lasted until the fifth round. Like I had no like inclination that the Eagles were going to get him, or that he was even going to be available at that spot. And the fact that they did, like even like pre-draft in my dynasty rankings, I had him very high. So the fact that they got him for that kind of price tag is excellent. And he could be that he turns into like that supercharged version of what Naheem Hines used to be or is in the Colts offense. So if he does that and Sanders takes that like JT like role, not that he's obviously not as talented as Jonathan Taylor is, but fitting into those slots in the offense, people don't realize, but Sanders had a 77% snap share last year. That was number 3 among running backs. He was on the field a lot more than people realize. So if he can even come close to that kind of numbers with hopefully the improvements in what the offense can do, I'm not as worried about what Gainwell can do as far as take snaps away from him, but as more than Gainwell can supplement what Scott was already doing, but doing it better.
Yeah, no, definitely. And if Sanders does go down, then there are backs present because Boston Scott's not going to fill in for Miles Sanders as a true 3 down back. But moving on, two wide receivers, Devontae Smith, Jalen Rager, both guys with first round draft capital, having been invested in them. Smith with the 10th overall pick in this year's draft, Rager with the 21st pick in last year's draft. Rager dealt with some injuries last year to his shoulder and his thumb, but he was on the field, or when he was on the field, he was not all that productive, just averaging 7 points per game. In an offense like this, one which I would imagine would be predicated on the ground game, how do you value these two wide receivers that are going off the board as wide receiver 36 and 56, respectively?
I think for wide receiver 36, so that puts him in a 12-team league at like the wide receiver 3 cusp. I think that's excellent price tag for a team's wide receiver 1, no matter who it is. And the fact that everyone makes a big deal about the fact that Smith and Hurts played in college together, but that does help somewhat with the familiarity. I think that everyone was really worried about Devontae Smith's like weight and stuff, and that is a concern. But like minus that, he was probably like the best receiver in the draft, maybe besides Jamar Chase. So he's exactly what the Eagles wide receiver core needs, which is someone that can actually get open, catch the ball, which is something we've lacked for a couple of years now. Which is funny because that's pretty much the receiver's job, but you couldn't tell with how the Eagles receivers have been playing. I think, and also that also helps Jalen Rager now, because with Smith, entrenched in that number 1 spot, Rager can slide into that number 2 and work those underneath routes and get that run after the catch that he's known for. So I think it does help them both. I think that price tag wise, I'm really good on both of them. I think that those two are easily the top 2 receivers in that offense. There really isn't much behind them in terms of superior talent or anything. Really, the only thing other targets in that offense are probably Dallas Goedert and then like Sanders and Gainwell. So it's not like they're fighting for targets with anyone else. So I with those price tags, not to sound like a homer here, but I think that they're being undervalued a little bit, and I would probably look at them over some of the other options that are going around that range.
Yeah, I mean, I think Devontae Smith has got he's the fact that he's a rookie, and we don't know for sure if he will be the number 1 target. We assume that he will be the number 1 guy, but maybe that's why he's going off the board, wide receiver 36. But Jalen Rager is kind of intriguing to me because he's the guy that's just kind of left for dead here. Was a first round pick last year. I really liked Jalen Rager last year. Again, wasn't all that productive on the football field, but the Eagles did try to get him involved. Carson Wentz just wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Hurts had his issues throwing down the field as well. So Rager in year 2 could definitely be intriguing to me. So maybe he's worth taking a flyer on if you're playing in these best ball leagues, and maybe you could go with a Jalen Hurts, Jalen Rager stack. Try to approach it that way and maybe leverage the market there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's the passing offense. as a whole wasn't very good. Like we can admit that, but it was interesting. Like I think it was like the third or so like pass play that Hurts was in. He threw like a 40-yard bomb down the sideline to Rager and caught him in stride. So I mean, you could see glimpses of the talent. It is there. So they just have to like put it all together. They have to get into an offense that's suited for their talents, and Peterson's offense wasn't like that. So I think I'm not going to say that they're going to be the top 10 or whatever wide receivers because they're probably not. The offense is still probably going to be going through growing pains. But I think at the prices that you could get them, it's especially in best ball drafts, it's definitely worth taking a flyer on them.
Yeah, definitely. Somebody who you definitely think will be involved in this offense this year, that will be Dallas Goedert entering year 4 with the Philadelphia Eagles, a contract year for him as well. We know that Ertz has probably played his final down with the Eagles. It has nothing been made official yet. But as fantasy managers, I think we all know that Goddard can handle this role. He was the tight end 10 last year on 54% of the offensive snaps. We got to see a bit of what it would look like with him at that tight end 1 role when Ertz got injured at the end of the year. He's currently going off the board at the tight end 7, and that's with Ertz still on the roster. So that shows you the fantasy managers have in him. Are we right to exercise that faith, Dan?
100%. I mean, just look at the stat you just said. He was wide receiver 10 playing barely above 50% of the snaps. Most of the year he was spent as a backup, and he was still a top 10 T. He's going to get 100% of the snaps once they get rid of Ertz. And like you said, now like everyone is starting from the ground up in the offense, so he's going to get that familiarity with Jalen. And he's going to be that intermediate like target or Lorenzo target that the Eagles have, because both Smith and Rager aren't those like big physical guys so much as like they're the shifty speed guys. So he's definitely going to be a big part of the offense. And I think that if he had played all 16 games like last year, he would have been even better. So getting to be that TE1 in that offense, and going back to the Indy offense, not saying the Eagles offense is going to be exactly like Indy. The Indy offense love their tight ends, so he's definitely going to be looked at early and often. And with Ertz no longer there, he's the undisputed number 1 target at the tight end position there. So I'm all in on Goddard this year, especially at this price tag, because if you're not going to get the Kelseys or the Kittles or the Wallers in the top rounds, and you want to wait a little while, he's one of those perfect targets you can wait and grab later on. They can still return that top 5 value potentially.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he's total upside play there when you're looking at tight ends relative to I mean, again, tight end ADP is could be all over the place, but tight end 7, I think that's more than fair value for a guy like Dallas Goddard who could assume the role that we think he's going to assume here. All right, man. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I've got one more question for you. I need an NFC East prediction. What is going down? Who's winning the NFC East, and where do you have the Eagles finishing?
So I think that Washington's going to win the East. I think that their defense is easily the best in the division. And I think Fitzpatrick stabilizes that QB position enough where they can win. I think the Eagles finish in third.
All right, fair enough, man. Fair enough. I don't. I mean, don't want to spoil it, but there's a reason why you and Jay have some pretty good chemistry there, man. So
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, everyone, make sure you go follow Dan at Eagle Dan FF, podcast with Upside, also working with Going for Two. So, Dan, is there anything else that you want the listeners to know about you before you head out of here?
Just for a lookout, I'm finishing up an article for Roto Underworld about the Bears running back core. I'm also updating my dynasty as well as working on my Devi and IDP rankings for Fantasy Pro. So get a look out for those. They should be coming up soon.
Yeah, man, and make sure you're definitely following Dan at Eagle Dan FF on Twitter. Uh, he's a great guy, great follow, and puts out great content. So definitely want to check that out. We appreciate Dan for coming on, and everyone have a wonderful, wonderful time.